Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. Eleanor, my wife, slipped away 3 months past. Yesterday, within the stifling confines of the attic, I unearthed her grandfather's clock. The impossibility lay here. I never placed it among the rafters and dust. For 23 years, that sentinel of time resided beside our living room hearth. Its familiar face greeted me each dawn as I descended for coffee, until yesterday. The first tremor of wrongness arrived with the 6:30 morning light. Sun slanted through the panes as always, yet a dissonance hummed in the living room air. I stood, coffee cup cooling in my hand, transfixed by the void beside the fireplace. A perfect rectangle of unfaded damask wallpaper, a pale ghost marking where the clock had stood sentinel. My coffee met the table. Perhaps it had toppled, so I searched behind the sofa. Nothing. The dining room, the study, even the kitchen yielded no sign of the ponderous timepiece. I navigate this house alone now. Only our daughter, Clara, living 2 states distant, holds another key. And this wasn't merely a clock. It was an Ainsworth and Thorne grandfather, vintage 1887, an heirloom passed down Eleanor's line. Mahogany cascaded in dark waves. The pendulum gleamed brass. Intricate carvings adorned its hood. A wedding gift from her grandfather, Eleanor had cherished its steady presence. Such a thing doesn't simply vanish. Clara's voice, when I reached her, held the expected blend of concern and distance. Visited the house, have you, or recently? No, Dad, not since the service. Why is something wrong? The clock, your great-grandfather's clock, it's missing. Missing? How? That piece must weigh 200 pounds. I know, yet it's gone. A break-in? My feet carried me through the silent rooms again, phone pressed to my ear. No shattered glass, no splintered doors. Everything else sits undisturbed precisely as it was. Could you have moved it, Dad, and forgotten? Your sleep hasn't been right since Mom. I did not move it, Clara, I stated, the words flat, certain. One doesn't forget shifting an heirloom like that. Disconnecting, I commenced another sweep, a more meticulous inventory of the familiar made strange. It was then I saw it, the attic access panel in the upstairs hall ceiling, agape by a hair's breadth. A pull-down ladder lurked behind it. I never venture there. Eleanor used it for stowing Christmas relics, forgotten photographs, untouched since her passing. I tugged the cord. A cascade of dust greeted me. The wooden rungs groaned under my ascent into the viscous heat above. Blades of light pierced the gloom from vents at either end, illuminating dancing motes in the stagnant air. There it stood, against the far wall, flanked by stacked cartons and shrouded furniture, was the clock. Simply there, as if rooted for decades. A tremor ran through my hand as I approached, the floorboards protesting my weight. My fingers brushed the mahogany case, coming away thick with dust. A fresh layer, impossible given it had been downstairs, gleaming only yesterday morning. I eased open the front panel. The pendulum hung inert. The weights were stilled. The hands declared the time to be eternally 3:47. The slender second hand remained frozen. How in God's name did you arrive here? The question escaped my lips, sounding hollow in the oppressive silence. Maneuvering that clock up the narrow attic stairs demanded 2 strong backs at minimum. I, 61, with a spine that complained daily, could not have managed it alone, not even in some fugue state of grief. Downstairs again, the rational world demanded action. I called the constabulary. Officer Reyes arrived within 20 minutes, young, composed, his notebook ready. I recounted the impossible migration. So nothing else is unaccounted for? He queried, pen poised. Only the clock's relocation. Yes, from the hearthside downstairs to the attic. He performed his own methodical circuit, windows, locks, finding nothing amiss. He ascended to the attic, examined the clock, the surrounding floor. No scuff marks on the floorboards up here, Mr. Vance, he reported upon his return. Dragging something this substantial would leave undeniable traces. Precisely. It's inexplicable. Officer Reyes offered a look I'd begun to recognize, the careful assessment reserved for the potentially unraveling. Mr. Vance, he began gently, you reside here alone now, is that correct? Yes. And you're quite certain you didn't move the clock yourself? Perhaps late one night without full awareness? I am certain. He made a notation. Have you been experiencing significant stress lately? My wife passed 3 months ago, I replied, striving for calm. But I am not inventing this. I understand, sir. Please, call us should anything further seem out of place, or if you discover any definitive signs of intrusion. His departure left me adrift in the quiet house. I sat again in the living room, staring at that unfaded rectangle on the wall. It gnawed at me. 23 years should have left a shadow, a subtle difference in hue between the protected space and the exposed wallpaper. Rising, I examined it closely. The damask within the rectangle was identical, precisely the same shade as its surroundings. No fading, none. A dull ache began behind my temples. The house felt suddenly wrong. I needed air. A walk through the familiar neighborhood streets did little to dispel the unease. Returning an hour later, drawn by an invisible thread, I climbed directly back to the attic. The clock remained, a silent, dusty sentinel. Opening the panel again, I inspected the mechanism. All appeared normal, merely quiescent. I tried the winding key. It refused to turn, rigidly locked. The remainder of the day dissolved in my home office, attempting to wrestle with a technical manual for industrial cooling systems. Concentration fractured. Every creak of the old house seemed amplified, my ears straining for sounds from above. Around 6 in the evening it came, a single resonant chime drifting down from the attic. I bolted up the ladder. The clock face remained fixed at 3:47. the pendulum motionless. Yet the sound had been undeniable. I stayed there for a full hour, watching, waiting. Silence reigned. No flicker of movement, no further sound. Eventually, hunger drove me downstairs. I microwaved a solitary lasagna, ate mechanically at the kitchen table, scrolling through meaningless news on my phone, a pantomime of normalcy. At 9:15, another chime echoed from above. This time, I ascended slowly, deliberately, phone flashlight cleaving the dimness, step by cautious step. The clock, still 3:47, pendulum immobile, dust undisturbed. From behind a stack of boxes, I retrieved a folding chair, setting it directly before the clock. If phantoms were to play, I would be their audience. Hours crawled by. The attic air grew chill. My phone read 11:52 p.m. My back throbbed from the unforgiving chair. Just as weary resignation began to set in, the temperature plummeted further. My breath plumed visibly in the flashlight beam. Precisely at midnight, the clock chimed again, louder, clearer, and this time, the unfathomable occurred. The second hand moved, a minuscule, distinct twitch, from the 47-second mark into 48. Then stillness returned. I surged from the chair, pulse hammering against my ribs. Fumbling, I opened the clock's panel. The pendulum hung lifeless, yet the air within the case felt glacial, biting. "Eleanor?" I whispered, the name tasting strange, hopeful, terrifying. Silence answered. I reached out, touched the brass pendulum. It was so cold it almost seared my skin, a cryogenic burn. I snatched my hand back. Then, my light caught something new on the inner wooden surface of the case. Faint scratches, raw, recent etchings in the dark wood. Leaning closer, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I deciphered the crudely formed letters HELPME. My legs turned liquid. I collapsed back into the chair. Those marks hadn't been there moments ago. I was utterly certain. Even as I watched, paralyzed, more scratches materialized, etched by an invisible, desperate hand. NOTDEAD. "Eleanor?" I called again. Louder, the sound choked. "Is it truly you?" The cold intensified, becoming painful. Frost spiderwebbed across the clock's glass face. Through the blooming ice, the second hand jittered again, 48 to 49. New words clawed their way into the wood. TRAPPED. "Where? Eleanor, how can I help you?" The scratches appeared faster now, frantic. BLACKBUOODSONSBASEMENTWAKEUP. My phone nearly slipped from my trembling grasp. Blackwood and Sons Funeral Home downtown. Eleanor's service. The viewing had been in their basement chapel. You're there? In the funeral home basement? ESCOLDISDIRKHELP. The second hand ticked to 50. "But I don't understand. We buried you. I watched them seal the casket." MISTAKENOTDEADWAKE Ice crystals formed in my beard, the frigid air hurting my lungs. You're in a coma? They buried you alive? By Shurry. The second hand advanced to 51. My mind raced, a maelstrom of horror and disbelief. Alive? Trapped? For 3 months? Impossible. Unless... When? When is this message from? Are you sending this from the past? VIEWSINGHTSTILLTIMEHURRY. The viewing, 3 months ago, the night before the burial. Was I somehow receiving a desperate plea across time? The second hand crawled to 52. How can I know? How do I know this isn't madness? That it's you? FIRSTDATEBLUEDRESCOFFEESPILLAUGHED. My heart had seized. 25 years ago, our first tentative date. Eleanor, radiant in a sapphire dress, my clumsy spill, coffee cascading down my shirt, her unexpected laughter warm and genuine, a sound that sealed my fate. She'd confessed later that was the moment, a story shared only between us. Oh God, Eleanor, it is you. HELPMEPLEASEHURRY. The second hand reached 53. I stumbled down the attic steps, fumbling for car keys. Blackwood and Sons was 20 minutes away. If this was real, if time itself had fractured to allow this. I drove like a man possessed, 80 miles per hour through sleeping suburban streets, arriving at the darkened funeral home at 12:27 a.m. Locked doors, impenetrable windows. I hammered on the heavy front entrance. A light flickered within. A stooped night watchman materialized behind the glass. "We're closed," his voice muffled. My wallet was already out, bills pressed against the glass. "Please, my wife. Her viewing is tomorrow. I must check something. An emergency." He studied the cash, then my face, perhaps seeing the raw desperation there. He hesitated, then turned the lock. 10 minutes, he grunted, pocketing the money. I flew down the stairs to the basement chapel. There it sat, Eleanor's closed casket, banked by funereal flowers. The viewing wasn't scheduled until 9 this morning. Tomorrow morning, time had become fluid. "Please," I implored the watchman, turning back to him. "You must open it. I'll give you more." He shook his head firmly. "Cannot do that, sir. Strict policy." I gripped his shoulders, my voice cracking. "She's alive. Perhaps a coma. Please, you must." He saw the frantic truth in my eyes, the sheer impossible conviction. After a long, agonizing moment, he sighed, producing a set of keys. The casket lid groaned open. Eleanor lay within, dressed in blue, pale, utterly still. I reached out, touched her hand. Cold, so cold. "But she's warm," I choked out, a different sensation beneath the chill. Underneath the cold, she feels warm. The watchman frowned, then pressed 2 fingers against her neck. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Holy," he breathed. There's a pulse." The ensuing hours were a frenetic sequence of paramedics, flashing lights, the sterile urgency of the emergency room. Doctors discovered a thread of a heartbeat, diagnosing a profound, rare coma that mimicked death with terrifying fidelity. They fought for her through the night. I sat numbly in a waiting room, watching the indifferent sweep of the wall clock's second hand past 3:47. At 6:23 a.m., a doctor emerged, face etched with fatigue and wonder. "Mr. Vance, your wife, she's awake." I ran. She lay in the hospital bed, impossibly pale, yet undeniably alive, her chest rising and falling, her eyes open, finding mine. "The clock," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "You received my message?" I clasped her hand, blessedly warm now. "Yes. But Eleanor, how?" I could hear everything. At the funeral home, she explained, words slow, measured. Trapped, screaming inside my own mind. Then I saw it, in the corner of the room, grandfather's clock. I focused all I was, all I had left, onto it. Somehow I reached across, found it in our house, had to move it, somewhere you would notice. The attic. Yes, it took everything to warn you. I kissed her hand, tears blurring my vision. "You're safe now. You're alive." A faint smile touched her lips. "What time is it?" I checked my phone. It's 6:25 a.m. "Good," so she breathed, closing her eyes briefly. "We made it. Made it." The burial had been scheduled for 7. Less than an hour remained before they would have committed her to the earth. I held her hand tighter, watching the sunrise paint the hospital window with strokes of impossible hope. 3 days later, Eleanor came home. The Ainsworth and Thorne stood once more beside the living room hearth, ticking with quiet authority. Neither of us questioned how it descended from the attic. The scratches inside its case had vanished without a trace. Yet sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, a faint chill still seems to emanate from the polished mahogany. And precisely at 3:47 a.m., the second hand falters, just for an instant, catching its breath between 47 and 48 seconds, as if recalling its extraordinary journey. I don't mind that fleeting pause. It saved Eleanor. It returned her to me. Now, when the clock chimes, I don't merely mark the passage of moments. I think of time bending, yielding just enough for love to tear through the veil. Eleanor's grandfather's clock keeps perfect time, save for that single spectral second each night when it remembers its defiance of death, the night it gifted us back to each other. Memory clings to the heft of that oaken door, the first time my palm pressed against its unyielding grain. Late afternoon it was, the sun's final exhalations painting the cathedral's cracked visage in hues of weariness and time. My whole existence, I'd traced the perimeter of that edifice, its portals ever barred, its stained glass eyes dark. But that particular day, Providence or negligence had left the main gate ajar, a dark invitation. A tremor ran through me, my pulse leaping like a startled bird. Elias, they called me, a man tethered to faith since boyhood, and the gravity emanating from within was undeniable, a siren song for the soul. Without conscious thought, my weight leaned into the wood, Groaning hinges fractured the stillness. Questions swarmed my mind, a frantic buzzing beneath the surface calm I tried to project, but my feet carried me onward. The threshold crossed. A sudden chill embraced me, the air stagnant, thick with the breath of forgotten years. Desolation reigned. Dust lay like a shroud upon the pews, some ravaged by rot, leaving skeletal remains. The walls wept plaster, revealing darker wounds beneath. A phantom scent, scorched wax and the ghost of incense, wove through the stillness, prickling my skin with an unnamed apprehension. I pulled the great door closed behind me. The sound ricocheted, a hollow percussion swallowed by the immensity. My breath hitched, shallowing against the cage of my ribs, my heart drumming a nervous rhythm. Once, this space had pulsed with devotion. Now, it felt a crypt where shadows gathered, sentient and watchful in every recess. Hesitant steps forward, careful not to disturb the silence unduly. Yet the scrape of my soles on dislodged floor tiles echoed disproportionately. A pause, and then something else, a susurrus, delicate as moth wings, shaping itself into latinate whispers. My grasp of the old tongue is fragmented, mere echoes from catechism, insufficient to decipher the meaning. It seemed to drift from afar, yet simultaneously coiled unnervingly close. My eyes swept the nave, seeking a source, finding only emptiness. The echo faded swiftly, leaving doubt. Had I heard anything beyond the wind's sigh through unseen cracks? Imagination, I cheated myself. Only the wind. My gaze caught on a smaller door, tucked away, promising passage to a constricted hallway. Dimness clung there, punctuated by shattered light fixtures overhead. Along the walls marched a procession of religious portraits, frames chipped, their holy visages obscured by decades of grime. Here, my footfalls sounded unnaturally loud, intrusive. I attempted to study the faces, but the gloom rendered them inscrutable masks. Onward I pressed, arriving at what appeared to be a side chapel, or perhaps an enclave for confession. Several wooden confessionals stood sentinel against the wall, their doors askew, hanging precariously. The air grew thick with the smell of mildew. The ancient wood groaned under the pressure of my mere presence. A clamminess bloomed on my skin, a shiver tracing my spine despite the warmth of my coat. Curiosity drew me to peer inside one booth. The penitent's seat, ripped velvet, stained papers scattered on the narrow shelf. Some were bleached illegible by time, others bore familiar Latin fragments, Domine, Miserere. A sudden, unexpected dread washed over me, the feeling of trespassing upon secrets not meant for mortal eyes. My hand, trembling slightly, reached for a small sheaf of notes tucked behind the fractured kneeler. Lines described apparitions near the altar, a luminous figure glimpsed in the periphery. Mentions of abrupt flashes of light, disembodied chanting, the sound of footsteps pacing empty aisles. One entry bore a date from decades past, etched in a shaky script. Another spoke of voices murmuring in the darkness, voices that whispered intimate knowledge of personal failings. My mouth turned to dust. A primal urge screamed to replace the pages, to flee, yet a deeper, more perilous curiosity held me fast. I read on. Recurring themes emerged, a presence within these walls that knew confessions yet unspoken, supplicants hearing their own secret shames whispered down the long, cold nave. the phantom touch of something unseen during prayer. My stomach clenched, nerves alight. My belief in the sacred had always been steadfast, but this felt aberrant. Not the tranquil hush of holiness, but something invasive, charged with an energy I could neither name nor comprehend. Carefully, I refolded the brittle papers, returning them to their hiding place. To take them felt like theft, like provocation. I left them undisturbed. Deeper I ventured, crossing the nave once more. My attempts at stealth were clumsy, my feet finding every loose stone, each scuff and stumble amplified in the vast chamber. Again, the whispers rose, faint yet undeniable, seeming to bleed from the very mortar and stone. I froze, held my breath, straining to listen. The murmuring ceased, replaced by a single, chillingly soft utterance, my own name, Elias. Tension locked my shoulders, sweat prickled my brow. Such familiarity in this desolate place felt profoundly wrong. Is anyone there? My voice cracked, swallowed by the void. Are you playing games? Silence answered, profound and absolute. I scanned the rows of pews, searching for any flicker of movement. A few benches creaked softly, protesting the passage of time, or perhaps settling under an unseen weight. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dropping behind a pew, I sought composure, peering between the dark wood slats. Nothing, only dust and dereliction. Rising, a jolt shot through me as the few remaining overhead lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the cathedral into deeper gloom, relieved only by the weak luminescence filtering through the high stained glass windows. And then the soft Latin chant returned, more insistent now. I forced myself forward, feet drawn down the central aisle toward the altar. Dust coated its surface like gray velvet. The altar cloth, once pristine white, hung limp and stained. Candelabra tilted at drunken angles. The silence pressed in, a physical weight against my eardrums, a building pressure. Reaching out, my fingers brushed the altar's surface. Grime clung to my skin. The stone beneath was cold, pitted, ancient. The whispers surged again, louder now, tangling with the Latin. My name was woven through them, alongside words I recognized. Confiteor, penitentium, confess, repent. My throat constricted. Words failed me. Abruptly, a current of air sliced through the stagnant atmosphere. The door behind me remained shut, the high windows sealed, yet the breeze was palpable, ruffling my clothes, raising gooseflesh on my neck. I spun around. Near the rearmost pew, a flicker of light, less than a second's duration, but distinct, a faint, man-shaped luminescence. I stood rooted, paralyzed. The fine hairs on my arms prickled erect. My knees threatened to buckle. My gaze remained fixed on the spot, waiting, but the apparition did not return. A shaky exhale escaped my lips. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. My mind churned. Flee. One part screamed. Stay. Investigate. Another compelled. Closing my eyes briefly, I offered a fragmented prayer for clarity, then opened them again. The scene remained unchanged. Decay, neglect, yet saturated with an undeniable heavy presence. I resolved to leave for now, but I knew, with chilling certainty, I would be back. Something here had claimed a piece of my attention, and the need to understand was a hook I couldn't easily dislodge. The ensuing days were haunted. The cathedral seeped into my waking thoughts, disrupting work, overlaying the familiar rituals of my parish church with images of dust-choked pews and shadowed corridors. Sleep offered no refuge. Dreams replayed the whispers, the unsettling glow. I'd wake drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard my name echoing in the confines of my own room. After several such nights, the decision solidified. I had to return. Proof, I told myself. Proof that my sanity remained intact. Re-entering the vast stone shell, the chill seemed to have deepened, biting through my layers. Near the entrance, I tried a light switch. Predictably, nothing. My small torch cut a nervous swathe through the darkness, illuminating more broken tiles, elaborate cobwebs like macabre lace, drifts of forgotten bulletins. The desolation felt absolute, yet the sense of being observed was stronger than ever. A faint rustling near the confessional drew me onward, my steps measured, cautious. Within that shadowed alcove, more notes lay scattered. Not one seemed newer, the ink less faded. It spoke of voices that know my failings, of an unseen insistence demanding my confession. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Initials marked the bottom, smudged beyond recognition. A soft creak sounded directly behind me. I whirled, torch beams slashing across empty floor, bare walls, nothing. Then the whispers returned, insidious, seeming to drift on unseen currents through the aisles. My heart knocked violently. My stomach twisted into a knot. I remained perfectly still, listening. The murmurs coalesced, sharpened, my name, Elias, spoken again. And then they began to speak of regrets I barely acknowledged even to myself, sins buried under years of willful forgetting, youthful transgressions, choices that cast long shadows. My head spun. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. "Show yourself," I shouted, the sound startlingly loud, immediately devoured by the echoing silence. My hands trembled, gripping the flashlight until my knuckles ached. Retreating toward the main altar, conviction grew. If any manifestation were to occur, it would be there. The air grew thick, resistant, like wading through water. My breathing hitched, ragged. My pulse thrummed a frantic beat in my ears. Reaching the altar rail, I swept the torchlight around. For a fleeting instant, the glow reappeared, hovering near the tabernacle's tarnished door. My hand shook, the beam dancing erratically. Then gone, leaving only dancing dust motes. This time, I forced myself to speak. "I am here," my voice unsteady. "I don't understand what you want, but I am here." Addressing the emptiness felt foolish, yet I continued. "Forgive me if I have trespassed or shown disrespect." The unnatural wind rose again, swirling around the altar steps. Below my feet, I thought I heard chanting, muffled, subterranean. My mouth was painfully dry. A voice, impossibly close, whispered, "Confiteor." "Confess." I nearly dropped the torch. Stumbling backward, words caught in my throat. Images flooded my mind. Every lie, every failure, every moment of doubt laid bare. Pressing a hand to my chest, I felt a frantic hammering within. "I'm sorry," I stammered again, the apology inadequate. Then the chanting subsided. I waited, poised between fear and a strange anticipation. After minutes stretched taut with silence, I turned and fled, hurrying toward the distant promise of the door, feeling utterly drained, profoundly disturbed. Over the following week, drawn by an invisible tether, I returned 4 more times. With each visit, the whispers intensified, grew more insistent. I tried reasoning, questioning, but the voices only demanded deeper, more personal confessions. They named specific events, dredged up memories I had fought to bury, exposed moments of faltering faith, times I had wronged others. The intimacy was violating. My chest constricted with each visit. I left feeling lightheaded, nauseated. Yet the compulsion remained, the desperate need to comprehend the nature of this haunting. By the fifth return, the cathedral itself felt subtly altered, almost sentient. Doors I distinctly remembered leaving open were now shut. Pews seemed minutely shifted from their previous positions. Footsteps echoed mine, always just behind me, vanishing when I turned. More notes appeared, tucked into hymnals, wedged in cracks, all chronicling experiences mirroring my own. Names called in the emptiness, fleeting glimpses of luminescence near the altar. No one described seeing a person, only the pervasive glow, the intrusive voices. My well-being eroded. Sleep was scarce. Concentration shattered. Concerned friends inquired about my health. I deflected with lies about a lingering cold. Prayer in my own church brought no solace, my thoughts inevitably drifting back to the abandoned stone giant and its secrets. A chilling suspicion began to form that something resided there, something ancient and hungry, feeding on human guilt, targeting the fault lines in one's soul. I am not prone to seeing signs in every shadow, but the palpable effect this place exerted could not be denied. One final visit. I resolved it would be the last. I would say what needed saying, offer what was demanded, and then sever the connection. I chose late afternoon again, seeking the thin buffer of daylight against the encroaching night. A small crucifix rested heavy in my pocket. A thicker coat served as armor against the bone-deep chill. Stepping inside, the cold struck instantly, piercing fabric and flesh. The gloom was profound, the dying light barely penetrating the nave. I walked directly to the altar, stood before the dust-laden cloth, the canted candelabra. Forcing my gaze forward, my voice trembling, I began to speak. I confessed everything, every remembered transgression, every doubt that had ever plagued my faith, every secret shame. The words tumbled out, raw and unadorned, a stark inventory of my failings. Sweat slicked my palms. My legs felt unsteady, threatening to collapse. The chanting erupted, louder than ever before, swirling around me like a vortex. My ears rang. My body tensed, braced against an unseen force. The air grew heavy, pressing down on my shoulders. Yet I continued, forcing the admissions past the tightness in my throat. The voices crescendoed, a roar of sound, and then ceased utterly. The silence that descended was absolute, so profound I could hear the frantic pulse in my own ears. For a heartbeat, the glow materialized directly before me, brighter this time, almost blinding. My eyes stung from refusing to blink. Then it dissolved back into the darkness. I stood there for a minute, perhaps two, breathing heavily, mind reeling. A peculiar sense of release began to bloom in my chest, the slow unfurling of a painfully tight knot. The whispers were gone. I listened intently, hearing only the sound of my own respiration. The air remained cold, but the oppressive weight had lifted, as if the presence, having received its due, had withdrawn. Slowly, deliberately, I walked back toward the great door, resisting the urge to look back. Outside, the late afternoon light felt like a benediction. I pulled the heavy door shut, the thud echoing with finality. Since that day, I have not returned. Sometimes, passing by, I see the cathedral gate locked tight once more. The windows remain dark voids. The building squats in its familiar state of abandonment. Whether others still hear the whispers, still glimpse the phantom light, I cannot say. I know only this. When I ceased resisting the truths harbored within me, the voices relinquished their power. Yet an unease lingers whenever my path takes me near those walls, a feeling of being watched by something cold and patient. My faith endures, but it carries new scars, feels more fragile. The memory of that voice, breathing my name in the darkness, that I suspect will remain with me always. The city's heart pulsed around this cramped apartment, a location chosen purely for the promise of liberated minutes, shaving down the daily commute. Sleep, however, became the unexpected sacrifice. Proximity to work, I'd reasoned, would streamline existence. Instead, it gnawed at the edges of my mind. Initial days unfolded in a blur of cardboard and misplaced belongings, a forced settling in under the banner of a better routine. Then, the fourth night fractured the calm. A fire alarm shrieked from the corridor, a brutal siren song near 2:30 in the morning. I vaulted from bed, heart hammering against ribs, stumbling towards the door in a daze. Confusion warred with the primal certainty that this sound was wrong. Yanking the door open revealed only the dim hallway, vibrating with the ear-splitting clangor bouncing off aged plaster. No smoke, no scent of burning, just noise. After an eternity compressed into minutes, silence crashed back in. Morning found me seeking the building's custodian, a man they called the concierge, Mr. Karras. His explanation involved tentative wiring, an antiquated system, a shrug, a promise of repair. Trusting him was my first folly. The following night, the ritual repeated. Same time, same deafening cry slicing through the dark. No fire, no reason. Clad in sleep clothes, I stood bewildered in the hallway's echo chamber. Annoyance curdled into unease. No other doors opened, peculiar. Surely the sound was inescapable. A tentative knock on my neighbor's door yielded only a sliver of light, a face peering out. He claimed ignorance, heard nothing, before the door clicked shut, a soft finality. This building breathes age through its thick concrete bones and heavy iron-framed windows. A persistent coolness haunts the corridors, indifferent to the season outside. Sound seems swallowed by the dense walls, a peculiar deadness muffling daytime footsteps. Yet the nocturnal alarm possesses a physical force, a vibration felt deep in the chest, impossible to ignore. How then could my neighbors feign oblivion? Daytime encounters yielded dismissive waves, murmurs of heavy sleeping or ubiquitous earplugs. Were they masters of denial or simply liars? By week's end, the alarm was a nightly tormentor, puncturing sleep somewhere in the desolate hours between 2 and 3. My eyes felt gritty, webbed with red veins. Sleeping aids offered no sanctuary. The sound pierced through. Renewed complaints to Mr. Karras met only his weary refrain. Faulty sensor. An electrician he'd vow it would investigate. The promise remained unfulfilled. The sixth night offered a variation on the theme. The The familiar klaxon erupted. I surged from bed, slick with a sweat born of frustration and a nameless dread. My hand hovered over the doorknob, a sudden reluctance gripping me, a deep-seated fear of what lay beyond. My pulse throbbed, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I opened the door. A thin, ethereal haze hung near the ceiling, a delicate mist shimmering in the dim overhead lights, which seemed unnaturally muted. No smoke, no heat, just this strange vapor. Then a presence. Down the corridor, near the fire extinguisher station, stood a figure. A silhouette, stark against the weak light, facing my way. Featureless, motionless. Instinct suggested a neighbor, perhaps checking the equipment. But as I took a hesitant step forward, the shape simply ceased to be. Not retreated, so not moved. Vanished as if my blinking had erased it. Heat prickled my neck. My stomach plummeted. I stood frozen, gulping air, scanning the empty passage. Nothing. I walked towards the extinguisher, my footfalls loud in the sudden hush that followed the alarm's abrupt cutoff. The silence felt heavier, more menacing than the noise. The extinguisher felt cold, untouched. A tremor traced my spine. Retreating to my apartment, I bolted the door, slid the chain, and feeling utterly irrational, wedged a small table against it. Sleep, thereafter, was a fragmented, haunted thing. The next day, a small security camera found its perch outside my door, aimed down the hallway. Proof, I thought, for Mr. Karras. It recorded onto a simple memory card. A lunchtime test confirmed its function, a clear view of the corridor. That night, the alarm ripped me from sleep, but disorientation held me captive until morning. Eagerly, I retrieved the card, anticipating evidence. The file for the crucial period was absent, not corrupted, simply gone, erased. A coldness has seeped into my skin. I understood the camera's simple, continuous recording. No motion activation, no gaps. Yet the timeline jumped from 1:59 a.m. straight to 3:01 a.m., swallowing the entire event. Armed with this digital ghost, I confronted Karras. He deflected, shaking his head. A defective card, perhaps? The old refrain about wiring resurfaced. When pressed about other complaints, he conceded a few infrequent grumbles, nothing constituting a big deal. A nightly alarm wasn't a big deal. It defied logic. He seemed utterly unperturbed. I mentioned the silhouette. Some asked about the building's own surveillance. Hallway cameras, he stated flatly, weren't operational. Installation incomplete. Testing pending. Excuses layered thick as dust. Over subsequent days, I tried engaging other residents, faces glimpsed in passing. A few admitted hearing the alarm sporadically, once or twice, never nightly. One man denied hearing anything ever. Another professed ignorance of hallway alarms altogether. Questions about mist or figures drew blank stares, head shakes. Pushing further elicited swift subject changes or looks that questioned my stability. My door became a fortress, double locked, chain secured, a chair jammed nightly beneath the knob. Excessive, yes, but the pervasive wrongness demanded it. Each alarm triggered a visceral response, waking drenched in sweat, hands trembling, mouth parched. A constant low-grade panic. I'd fling myself from bed, check the peephole or crack the door. Sometimes, the corridor was just a corridor, brightly lit, vacant. Other times, that faint mist lingered distantly. Twice more, I glimpsed the shape, near the glowing exit sign by the extinguisher, but it dissolved the instant I tried to focus. Relocating my bed to the living room, farther from the door, proved futile. The sound permeated the walls regardless. One night, I resolved to stay put, lying rigid, staring at the ceiling as the alarm wailed. My heart raced, muscles clenched. After 5 agonizing minutes, silence fell. Then a faint rustling, like cloth dragging or soft footfalls just outside my door. Pressing my ear to the wood, I strained to hear. Not words, but something akin to shallow breathing, a whisper just below comprehension. Then nothing. I confided in Leo, a friend from work. Stress-induced hallucinations, he suggested gently. He agreed to stay over, a witness to my nightly ordeal. At 2:10 a.m., punctual as ever, the alarm exploded. Leo shot upright from the couch, eyes wide. What the hell? We rushed the door. I pulled it open. Empty corridor, normal lights. The alarm shrieked for perhaps 30 seconds, then ceased. Leo looked at me, shrugged. No smoke, no smell? No. We stepped out. No haze, no silhouette, only the familiar, unsettling chill. He lingered another couple of hours before citing an early meeting and departing, conceding the alarm was weird, but perhaps just a glitch, unconvinced by its brevity that night. Another evening, I decided to preempt the event. Armed with a folding chair and a thermos, I stationed myself near the elevator bank around 1:45 a.m. The hallway lights hummed, pipes gurgled intermittently within the walls. I waited, hyper-alert, until nearly 3. Silence reigned. Defeated, I returned to my apartment. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the alarm began. It felt deliberate, malicious. Rushing back out revealed only the shrieking emptiness. It stopped after a minute. The thought, insidious and unwelcome, surfaced. This wasn't mechanical. I suppressed it, fearing the label of paranoia. Approaching Mr. Karras again was useless. He cut me off. Look, the sensor in your corridor was replaced. If you still hear it, maybe it's another floor. Check all floors, I pleaded. He rolled his eyes, offered a hollow promise to look into it. I knew he wouldn't. My phone became a nightly sentry, recording audio near the door. Sometimes, it captured the alarm's piercing cry perfectly. Other times, inexplicably, the audio file showed a clean gap during the precise window of the event. Battery full, storage ample. It made no sense. Calling the fire department felt like escalating things too far, risking neighborly ire and official hassle over a potential malfunction. Sleep dwindled further. I lay awake, anticipating the sound. Every creak became a prelude. Anxiety coiled in my chest long before 2 a.m., hands growing damp, a sheen of sweat prickling my skin. The feeling was absurd, yet undeniable. I missed the simple peace of unconsciousness. Around midnight one evening, a noise outside, metal scraping metal. Heart leaping, I peered through the peephole. Only a sliver of dim hallway, a flickering overhead bulb. I held my breath, listening intently. The sound ceased. Trembling slightly, I opened the door. Empty. The fire extinguisher station, undisturbed. Back inside, locks secured, table wedged. The ritual felt less ridiculous each time. The next day, I attempted conversation with a neighbor down the hall. Had he seen anything unusual near the extinguisher? He regarded me as if I'd sprouted horns. No idea what you're on about, mate. never seen anything weird. The alarm? A headshake? Sleep like the dead. He muttered about work and hurried away. A full month has bled away since I moved in. The alarm persists, 4 nights a week or more, reliably between 2 and 3. The haze comes and goes. The figure remains an ephemeral maybe. Neighbors are conversational brick walls. Mr. Karras avoids eye contact. Rearranging furniture yielded nothing but sore muscles. The camera continues its selective blindness, files vanishing into the digital ether. My door now bears 2 locks. A third feels imminent. When the shriek begins, I jolt awake, drenched, heart battering my ribs. I stand by the door, sometimes pressing my forehead to the cool wood, straining to hear footsteps over my own frantic pulse. I rarely venture out now. The potential glimpse of the inexplicable tightens my chest unbearably. I wait for the silence, then crawl back to sweat-damp sheets, stare at the ceiling, head pounding. Was this move a catastrophic error? Thoughts of breaking the lease flicker, tempting but daunting. The convenience remains, the hassle of another move looms large. Yet this existence, nightly shocks, phantom noises, spectral glimpses, is unsustainable. Exhaustion is a constant companion. My hands shake unlocking the door each morning. The relentless tension frays my nerves. I don't know the cause. Elaborate prank, faulty system, or something stranger rooted in the building's old bones. I only know that each night I brace for the piercing sound. When it comes, the familiar cascade, hammering pulse, burning sweat, racing thoughts unanswered. I stand by my locked door, waiting for the silence, wondering if the silhouette watches from the hazy corridor. No one else sees, no one else hears. I am alone in this, ground down by sleeplessness and fear. Until I leave, I wake to the alarm, heart pounding, door secured, praying for a night it finally stays silent. Solitude, not strangeness, was the promise I sought in this city of weathered stone and quiet lives. Yet scarcely a week into my tenancy, the night air delivered something unsolicited. A low, melancholic whistle, drawn out like a sigh, emanating from the chasm beneath my window. Bolting upright, I peered into the alley's cleft, a familiar tableau of ancient masonry and a lone, sputtering street lamp, haloed by dampness. Nothing stirred. A drunkard, perhaps? A late-night wanderer? So I reasoned until the sound returned, punctual as dread, the following midnight and the one after. It possessed an unnerving deliberateness, devoid of casual air, tightening a knot in my chest. Days at the office became punctuated by the rhythmic tap of my pencil, my mind circling the possibility. Was this phantasm purely my own invention? My existence is unremarkable. Elias Thorne, ledger keeper in a modest accounting firm nestled in the city's ancient heart. The work offers sustenance, not stimulation. Home is a cramped flat tucked away on a serpentine lane, largely forsaken after dusk. Here, the opposing walls lean inward, close enough to bridge with outstretched arms. Nightfall swathes the passage in a palpable chill, indifferent to the season, a cold intensified by my apartment's defunct radiator. Multiple blankets serve as my inadequate shield against the encroaching frost. One adapts. Each evening concludes with a trek home around 10 or 11, a journey expedited by threading through a network of narrow capillaries branching off the main thoroughfares. Illumination is sparse, provided by archaic fixtures bolted onto stone facades, half of them extinguished relics. My own footfalls become intrusions, amplified by the confining walls, echoing with an unnerving resonance that leaves me feeling starkly exposed. Roughly 2 weeks after the whistle first pierced my quietude, a new sensation emerged, the prickle of unseen eyes. Midway down some shadowed cut-through, the nape of my neck would ignite, my pulse hammering against my ribs. A swift pivot invariably revealed the same stark emptiness, constricting walls, perhaps a stray feline investigating refuse bins, or the scurry of a rat, but never a human form. Once I attempted stealth, sliding my soles across the flagstones, straining to catch another's tread. Silence answered, profound save for the distant, rhythmic drip from a corroded downspout. This utter stillness coiled around me, more menacing somehow than any overt sound. I ventured a mention to a colleague, a man named Davies. He offered only a shrug, muttering about the city's age, its abundance of peculiar corners, how easily one could conjure specters from shadows. Disliking this burgeoning fear of my own surroundings, I resolved one night to alter my path. Forsaking the deepest alleys, I clung to a broader, marginally better lit street, sacrificing 15 minutes for a perceived sense of security. Yet even there, it found me. The whistle, initially a mere filament of sound on the breeze, grew, insinuating itself into my hearing. Every hair on my body seemed to rise. I halted, listening intently. It persisted, seeming to ricochet off the buildings, paradoxically drawing nearer as I stood motionless. The sheer wrongness of it, that simple, low-pitched motif, repeating its mournful phrase, was deeply unsettling. A glance over my shoulder yielded nothing. My eyes scanned the periphery, probing for a shadow, a figure lurking near a corner. Emptiness greeted me. With conscious effort, I propelled myself forward, reaching my building's entrance, only to fumble with the key, my hands betraying a tremor I couldn't suppress. Sleep offered no refuge. My thoughts churned. Images flickered behind my eyelids. A derelict figure, leaning heavily on a stick, whistling from just beyond sight. A hooded stalker drifting through the lanes, purpose unknown. Melodramatic fantasies, perhaps, yet the whistle itself felt undeniably real, a truth my own taut nerves confirmed. The bed felt glacial that night, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the window, scanning the void below. Around 3 a.m, I fancied I heard faint footfalls, though sleep might have been blurring the edges of reality. Morning found me depleted, dark crescents etched beneath my eyes. Davies inquired about late-night television binges. I offered no correction. Days later, a fragile courage coalesced within me. I would intercept the whistler. Departing the office ahead of schedule, I shed the day's grime with a quick shower, donned dark attire, and slipped back into the evening chill. I positioned myself near my doorway, pressed against the damp, cool stone. The ground beneath felt uneven. The air hung thick with the scent of mildew and old refuse. An hour crawled by, my muscles aching from stillness. Then it began, the familiar, elongated note, originating deeper within the alleyway labyrinth. Visibility was nil, but the sound was unmistakable. My stomach clenched, sweat prickled my brow. Retreat beckoned, a siren call of safety, but I held my ground. This fear was intolerable. I needed to see its source. The melody unfolded, revealing its structure, 4 or 5 notes, a breath of silence, then the cycle renewed. A melancholic air clung to the tones as they reverberated between the close-set walls. I began to advance towards the sound, my sneakers whispering against the cobblestones, my breath consciously steadied against the frantic drumming in my chest. Nothing ahead. I passed beneath a faltering street lamp, its light momentarily flaring before dimming again, casting my own shadow large and distorted beside me, an unsettling companion. Turning a corner, my steps faltered. There, at the alley's terminus, stood a silhouette, indistinct, a mere density against the faint urban glow filtering from beyond. My feet felt rooted to the spot, jaw tightening. The whistle persisted, clearer now, undeniably emanating from that distant shape. "Hey!" The shout tore from my throat, the echo sharp and immediate. The silhouette registered the sound, a subtle shift in its posture. I surged forward a few paces. Abruptly, the whistling ceased. A scuffling noise reached me, the drag of a shoe on stone. I broke into a run. By the time I reached the spot, it was vacant. Heart hammering, breath ragged, I scanned the surroundings. The alley split into 2 narrower fissures, both swallowed by darkness. I strained my ears for the whistle. Silence. A capricious breeze stirred a loose sheet of paper across the ground. Mechanically, I retrieved it, a tattered, faded flyer for some forgotten local festival. Useless. I remained there for some time, swallowing against the dryness in my throat, before turning back towards my flat, the encounter leaving me adrift in a deeper confusion. That night became a loop, replaying the instant the silhouette materialized. Its height seemed comparable to my own. The dark coat obscured any defining features. Yet something in its stance resonated, a stillness that felt less like hiding and more like waiting, a deliberate presentation. Sleep remained elusive. Eventually, I rose, brewed instant coffee, a bitter ritual, and stared down into the alley, as vacant as ever. I secured the window latch, a small futile gesture against the pervasive unease. The following day at the office was a fog of perpetual yawning. My supervisor's reprimand over a bungled spreadsheet stung with humiliation. My focus was shattered, nerves frayed thin, every spare thought snagged by the memory of that insidious whistle. A week bled into the next, marked by the whistle's nightly return. Its proximity varied, sometimes a distant echo, other times seeming to emanate from directly beneath my sill. Each frantic check revealed only emptiness. Frustration mounted, a corrosive acid in my gut. Considering the landlord, the police, felt pointless. What complaint could I lodge? Nocturnal whistling in old alleys? Dismissal seemed certain. I attempted to capture the sound with my phone, but each time the record button was pressed, the whistle would either diminish into ambiguity or cease entirely, leaving me with recordings of ambient city hum and my own ragged breathing. Finally, one Friday evening, I resolved upon a more systematic exploration. Home from work, I swapped shoes for sturdier ones, armed myself with a flashlight, and plunged into the warren of passages behind my building. The night air bit sharply. I jammed my free hand deep into a pocket. The flashlight's beam was a weak probe against the oppressive dark, yet better than nothing. I navigated the twists and turns, stepping over slick puddles and scattered debris, pausing intermittently to listen, straining for that first telltale note. After perhaps half an hour, it reached me, seemingly originating from an alley abutting a small, deserted courtyard. I moved towards it, caution warring with a desperate curiosity, the blood pulsing insistently in my temples. I emerged into a cramped courtyard hemmed in by towering stone flanks. A single, unsteady lamp in one corner cast a meager glow upon a battered wooden bench. Here, the whistle resonated more strongly. I scanned the space, trying to triangulate the source. My footfalls crunched on loose gravel near the bench. Suddenly, soft steps sounded just behind me. I spun around, flashlight beams slashing through the dark. It grazed a fleeting outline before the figure darted behind a low, retaining wall. Pursuit was instinctual, my lungs burning. Reaching the corner, I found only shadows. My light swept the ground, gritty paving stones, a scattering of dead leaves, no discernible prints. Heart pounding, I stood utterly still, listening for the whistle. It had evaporated once more. A profound chill traced its way down my spine. I switched off the flashlight, plunging myself into darkness, hoping my eyes might adjust, might catch some furtive movement. I waited, my own breathing unnaturally loud in the stillness, the scent of damp stone and ancient moss filling my nostrils. My fingers felt slick around the flashlight's casing. After a minute, or perhaps longer, bathed in silence, I reignited the beam and slowly retraced my path. No sight, no sound disturbed the quiet. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I finally regained my apartment, collapsing onto the couch, every muscle screaming with accumulated tension. Morning arrived with a stiff neck and the residue of fear. Over potent coffee at my small table, I mentally dissected the previous night's events. Weariness settled deep in my bones. This city, I mused, hoarded its secrets within crumbling facades, forgotten tunnels, sealed chambers, and derelict houses. Local lore whispered of phantoms and buried fortunes, tales I'd always dismissed as fanciful distractions. Now I found myself entangled in a narrative I couldn't decipher. The persistent whistle, the fleeting silhouette, the unnerving sense of being observed. It all felt intensely personal, directed. In the days that followed, I attempted denial. Returning from the office, I'd immediately fill the apartment with music, a bulwark against the sounds beyond my walls. Occasionally, through the melodies, I thought I detected faint, whistling undertones, but I fiercely told myself it was auditory illusion, phantom echoes born of stress. A persistent ache settled in my stomach. Colleagues remarked on my pallor. I mumbled excuses about poor sleep. Their suggestions of a weekend escape were politely deflected. I couldn't leave. Some stubborn part of me needed resolution, needed to understand. The feeling of powerlessness was intolerable. One evening, traversing the familiar alley towards my front door, the whistle returned. This time, however, it possessed a different quality, softer, less insistent, almost hesitant. My body seized with reflexive tension. I turned the key, slipped inside, but paused, holding the door ajar, listening. A quiet scraping sound on the pavement outside, heartbeat accelerating. I stepped back out, eyes sweeping the narrow passage. The ancient street lamp hummed its electric drone, A moth danced erratically in its glow. Then, near a corner perhaps 30 feet distant, I discerned a nebulous shape. Tentatively, I advanced a few steps. The shape stirred. It resolved into a human form clad in dark clothing. The whistle recommenced, low and clear. My mouth felt instantly dry, hands trembling. Shout? Flee? Confront? Indecision paralyzed me. "Stop this!" My voice emerged thin, cracking under the strain. The figure moved, stepping slightly forward. For a fraction of a second, under the dim light, I thought I glimpsed a face, unreadable, indistinct, definitely male. He halted, seemed to regard me for a long moment, then turned deliberately away. He proceeded down the alley without a backward glance, the whistle trailing behind him like a fading signature. I stood frozen, stunned. Then the paralysis broke. I ran after him, heart slamming against my ribs. Rounding the corner, I caught a final glimpse as he melted into another unlit passageway. I sprinted, legs unsteady beneath me. Reaching the entrance to the passage, I found only emptiness. No receding footsteps, no lingering whistle, just the cold, indifferent stone. The pressure in my chest felt immense. I realized I was gasping for breath. Returning to my apartment felt like walking through water. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat vigil by the window, attuned to the night. Sporadically, faint wisps of the whistle drifted through the air, reminders of his continued presence. My mind didn't conjure elaborate fears or theories anymore, just the stark facts. He was real. He was agile. He navigated these labyrinthine alleys with an intimacy I lacked. And this wasn't over. Why me? Was I the sole target? Questions without answers circled endlessly. Dawn brought a leaden ache behind my eyes. My reflection stared back, hollow-cheeked, eyes bloodshot. This existence, a cycle of fear and exhaustion, was unsustainable. Yet the thought of flight felt like surrender, allowing him, whoever he was, to drive me from my home. This city, despite its oppressive closeness and shadowed corners, was where I'd chosen to be. No alternative beckoned, so a decision hardened within me. I would continue the search. I would haunt the alleys as he haunted me. I would listen for that mournful tune. Face to face, I would demand an explanation. The conclusion remained shrouded, but hating was no longer an option. I sensed it deep within me. The whistle was more than just a sound. It was a cipher, intrinsically linked to these ancient stones, these serpentine paths. Unraveling its secret became imperative. Until then, vigilance would be my watchword, my feet planted firm, my nerves honed. Should he reveal himself again, I would not turn away. The running was finished. If cornered, I would stand my ground. Enough living in the periphery of this place's shadows. I may be solitary against whatever presence stalks these lanes, but retreat is no longer conceivable. The mire-stained tracks halted precisely at my threshold, as though their maker had dissolved into the morning mist. I stood suspended, fingers ghosting the cold brass of the doorknob, my thoughts skittering down shadowed pathways, none leading anywhere comforting. It was meant to be a Tuesday like any other. I recall the autumn air, sharp against my skin, as I stepped onto the porch for the morning paper. Dawn bled across the horizon, stretching the skeletal shadows of the leafless maples over the lawn. That's when I registered them, a sequence of deep, wet earth impressions marching up my flagstone walk. A trivial thing initially, perhaps the delivery boy, careless with puddles. But stooping for the rolled newsprint, I saw the scale, not the scuff marks of youth. These were vast, heavy gouges pressed deep, their stride unnaturally long, suggesting haste or something else entirely. My gaze traced their path, an icy tendril curling around my spine as their destination became undeniable, my own front door. Yet the strangeness amplified there. The prints ceased absolutely at the bristled welcome mat. Whoever, whatever had made them, had simply stopped existing at that spot. I scanned the periphery, half expecting a figure lurking within the gloom beneath the ancient oaks bordering the property. Silence answered, save for the distant thrum of the awakening city. With a tremor in my hand, I turned the key, slipped inside, and instantly threw the deadbolt. The house breathed its usual quietude, undisturbed. Every object sat in its familiar place from the night before. I tried to dismiss the prickling unease, blaming it on sleeplessness, perhaps too many late-night films noir. A potent brew of coffee seemed the antidote, the ritual a hopeful anchor to the mundane. But seated at the kitchen table, my eyes kept flicking to the front window. The muddy prints remained, stark, irrefutable evidence against my self-diagnosis of fantasy. A certainty settled over me. I was being observed. Work was unthinkable, the notion of leaving the house a physical impossibility. I phoned in sick. The day dissolved into a restless patrol, room to room, testing locks, peering through slivers in the blinds. By midday, the pendulum swung back. Surely I was amplifying shadows. I craved proof, tangible validation that my mind wasn't fraying. Then recollection surfaced. The security cameras installed a year prior, following a spate of local burglaries. The initial vigilance had long faded, but now gratitude surged for that past self's caution. My laptop hummed to life, fingers unsteady as I navigated the security software, motion-activated recording. If anything had approached, the digital eye would have captured it. Starting from the previous evening, I sped through hours of nocturnal stillness. Trees swayed, clouds drifted. As the timestamp neared midnight, I slowed the playback, leaning in. Nothing. Only the occasional sweep of headlights painting the street. Onward, 1 o'clock, 2. Stillness reigned. My coffee cooled, forgotten. Just as doubt began to crystallize, at precisely 3:17 a.m., movement flickered at the frame's edge. My breath hitched. A figure materialized on the screen. Grainy night vision obscured specifics, yet its stature was immediately apparent, unnervingly tall, far exceeding human norms. Its locomotion was wrong, a gliding, disjointed drift across the lawn that defied natural mechanics. Heart hammering against my ribs, I pressed closer to the display. It advanced toward my door, movements sharp, almost spastic. It paused upon the welcome mat, utterly immobile for a span that stretched into an eternity. Then, between one frame and the next, it was gone. There, not there, vanished. Rewind, play, again. The sequence held. No artifact of light, no digital hiccup. The figure had simply ceased to be. I leaned back, the chair creaking in the silence, my brain struggling to stitch the impossibility into the fabric of reality. People do not just dissolve, and yet the recording offered its silent, irrefutable testimony. The remainder of the day passed in a fugue state, oscillating between obsessive rewatching of the footage and anxious surveillance from the windows. The muddy impressions outside persisted, anchoring the unreality. As dusk bled into night, anxiety coiled tighter. What if it returned? Locks were rechecked, curtains drawn taut. I braced for a night devoid of sleep, the laptop open, casting a pale glow, the live feed a focal point for my strained eyes. At 3:15 a.m., a sharp intake of breath. There, at the periphery of the camera's vision, a subtle shift. Paralyzed, I watched it coalesce again. The figure, that same unnatural drifting progress across my lawn, vectoring straight for the door, a primal urge to flee, warred with a morbid compulsion to witness. It reached the mat, stopped, seconds dilated, each heartbeat echoing in the tense quiet. Then, a sound froze the marrow in my bones, 3 distinct, sharp raps upon the front door. I jolted, nearly sending the laptop crashing. The knocking sounded again, louder, more insistent. I sat immobile, caught between raw terror and a dreadful curiosity. A voice followed, low and rough, like stone grating on stone. "I know you're in there, Elias. I can see you." My eyes shot to the laptop screen. The figure was no longer visible in the camera's view. How could it see me? Betraying every instinct, screaming for concealment, I found myself rising, moving toward the door. My hand, slick with sweat, reached for the deadbolt. A deep breath, a moment of bracing, and I wrenched the door open. Nothing, only the vast, indifferent quiet of the night, the empty porch, and those damnable muddy prints ending where existence apparently did. I slammed the door, bolting it, my heart threatening to batter its way out of my chest. What was happening? Was this the shape of madness? Sleep became a forgotten country that night, and the next. The muddy prints endured, defying my attempts to scrub them into oblivion, mocking me with their tangible inexplicability. Days bled into weeks, paranoia becoming my constant companion. More cameras sprouted around the house, an electronic thicket guarding every approach. Motion sensors, alarms, my home transformed into a besieged outpost, yet safety remained an illusion. Every night, punctual as a phantom clock, 3:17 a.m. brought its visitation. Sometimes it would glide to the door, other times it merely stood at the property line, a tall darkness observing. Its face remained elusive, perpetually lost to shadow or the camera's limitations. I shared the footage with skeptical friends, with perplexed police officers, even with a self-proclaimed paranormal consultant. Recognition flickered in their eyes. They saw what I saw, but explanations remained stubbornly absent. Patrols increased, yet the nocturnal visitor remained unseen by official eyes. Weeks warped into months. I eroded, becoming a creature of shadows myself, hollowed by fear and sleeplessness. My universe contracted to the dimensions of my house, my gaze perpetually tethered to the mosaic of security feeds. Then, as abruptly as it commenced, it ceased. One night, 3:17 a.m., passed uneventfully, and the next, and the one after. Weeks accumulated into a tentative silence. Hope, a fragile seedling, began to push through the impacted soil of my fear. It seemed my visitor had withdrawn. Slowly, tentatively, I began to stitch my life back together. I stepped outside into sunlight, reconnected with forgotten faces. The muddy prints had long surrendered to weather and time, erased from the walkway. Yet even now, years removed, the echo of those nights persists. Sometimes, startled awake in the deep, pre-dawn stillness, I find myself listening, breath held, for 3 sharp knocks that never come, and occasionally indulging an old, ingrained habit of checking the security logs. I fancy I detect it, a flicker, an unnaturally tall shadow at the very edge of the frame, gone in an instant, leaving me uncertain, questioning my own senses. In those moments, the chill returns, a reminder that some enigmas refuse resolution. And I wonder, deep in my bones, if my midnight caller is still out there, patient, merely waiting. A phantom coldness persists, tracing the vertebrae of my spine as I sit here, wrestling the unsteady rhythm of my own breathing. Even at this moment, the venerable architecture of this house seems to contract around me, whispering secrets just beyond comprehension. Solitude has been my companion these past weeks, ever since Aunt Maeve's passing bequeathed this pile to me. A dubious inheritance it felt initially. The structure was ancient, burdened by decades of quietude, yet I envisioned restoration, resale, release. No other kin had shown the slightest claim. But tonight, a palpable charge electrifies the stagnant air within these rooms, an awareness sentient and observant. Here I linger, breath held captive in the upper hallway near the attic's threshold. Memory drifts back, unbidden, to the evening's discovery. That mask, fashioned from pallid ceramic, its visage a blank canvas, save for the ghostly filaments of pigment encircling its vacant orbits. I recall the precise instant my fingers made contact. An unnatural warmth radiated from the surface. As my touch skimmed its cheek, a visceral shiver coursed down my spine, leaving a knot of nausea tighten low in my gut. I unearthed it from a dilapidated cardboard sarcophagus secreted behind a hulking wardrobe in the attic's gloom. The cloying perfume of decay hung heavy up there, wood rot mingling with the stale breath of enclosed spaces. My ascent had been purely exploratory, a hunt for forgotten heirlooms, or perhaps fragments of my aunt's sequestered history. Shoving aside strata of jaundiced newsprint and dust-laden doilies revealed it. That bleached face, staring sightlessly skyward, half interred in detritus. Why I retrieved it remains elusive. Curiosity, perhaps. It possessed the melancholic allure of antique shop curios, crazed glaze, time-stained edges. Yet a disquietude resided in the stark simplicity of its features, mere hollows for eyes, a subtle convexity hinting at lips. Following that peculiar jolt, upon first touching it, I attempted nonchalance. I transported it downstairs, affixing it to the living room wall, a potential accent amidst the house's existing clutter of relics. Yet as twilight deepened into evening, a dissonance grew. Each passage past the living room doorway brought the unnerving impression of metamorphosis in the mask's expression. Nothing overt, no leering grin, nor thunderous scowl, but subtle reconfigurations in the map of its fissures. Near midnight, I found myself arrested before it. In the absence of electric light, lunar rays illuminated a spiderweb lattice of hairline fractures sprawling across the ceramic. These lines coalesced into something akin to a twisted smile, a mirth too faint for certainty, yet my pulse hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Enough, I resolved. I grasped the mask, attempting to dislodge it from its perch, but it clung stubbornly, as if the hook itself resisted. Unwilling to risk breakage or further fray my nerves with sudden noise, I abandoned it and retreated upstairs, seeking oblivion in sleep. Still, an agitated energy thrummed within my skull. The instant I extinguished the bedroom lamp, a sound drifted from below, a stifled chuckle, low and coarse, as though filtered through layers of dense textile. I froze, breath caught, straining against the ensuing silence. Old plumbing, perhaps? A wind-driven branch scoring the siding? Rationalizations warred with the tightening vice in my chest, the undeniable sensation of being watched. Sleep eventually claimed me, though it was a turbulent, unremembered passage. I surfaced sometime in the dead hours, 3, maybe 4 in the morning, throat parched, heart galloping. An ache throbbed in my neck. Fumbling for the bedside lamp, I blinked against the sudden glare, and then I saw it. The mask, reposing mere inches from the bed, placed with an almost gentle precision. My stomach lurched. I knew with chilling certainty I had left it downstairs. No one else resided here. Tremors seized my fingers as I reached tentatively towards the cool ceramic once more. My hand recoiled instinctively. Swallowing thickly, I retreated, pressing myself into the headboard's embrace. Had I walked in my sleep, descended and retrieved it in some somnambulant fugue? The thought slicked my skin with cold sweat. My gaze shot to the bedroom door, still locked from within. I distinctly remembered turning the key. How? Too unnerved for further sleep, I endured the remaining darkness, sitting bolt upright, ears straining against the profound hush of the house, a silence so complete I could almost hear the surge of my own blood. The mask lay supine on the floorboards, its network of cracks perpetually forming that subtle, mocking grin. For hours I observed it. It remained inert, yet I couldn't dispel the conviction that it was waiting. Dawn's thin light, slicing through the inadequate curtains, lent me the resolve to handle it again. My hand quivered as I carried its weight back downstairs. The living room presented its usual tableau: dated furnishings, a musty rug, the ineradicable scent of damp timber. I positioned the mask on the coffee table, then sat opposite, scrutinizing it in the pale morning illumination. The fractures seemed more pronounced now, tracing intricate patterns around the eye sockets. Prolonged focus conjured a semblance of personality behind the vacant stare. It felt as though the mask were appraising me. Answers were imperative. I sifted through the archival drifts in the study: Aunt Maeve's faded correspondence, receipts spanning decades, handwritten notes devoid of any mention of a mask. A clutch of Polaroids emerged from a drawer. My aunt, younger, smiling beside unfamiliar figures in antiquated dress. In the periphery of one snapshot, a shape hung upon a wall, potentially the mask or a close cousin. Another photograph captured a solemn group clustered around a large, ornate wooden chest. Their expressions were grim. The mask wasn't visible, yet an intangible connection resonated, unprovable but deeply felt. I tried to suppress the rising anxiety. Lunch was a mechanical process, chewing slowly, the food tasteless. The mask maintained its vigil on the coffee table, visible from my kitchen seat. It was like having company, an intrusive guest, perpetually silent, yet relentlessly staring. Clearing my throat felt unnaturally loud, expecting an echo that never came, only that taut stillness. As dusk began to bleed through the windows, the tension coiled tighter in my chest. Decision made. Fetching a spare sheet from a linen closet, I draped it over the mask, the fabric settling, swallowing the eerie grin. Out of sight, out of mind, a desperate mantra. Perhaps escape was possible tomorrow. Find a buyer incurious about provenance. Upstairs, I braced for another protracted night, limbs leaden. Reading proved futile, my gaze repeatedly snagged by the doorway, anticipating a soft scrape, a smothered giggle. Eventually, darkness was summoned. I lay rigid, heart thumping. For several minutes, blessed quiet reigned. No noises, no shifting phantoms. Just as a fragile hope for sleep began to bloom, I heard it again, that muffled laughter. I bolted upright, breath snared. It sounded nearer this time, just beyond the door. Flashlight clutched, I crept into the hallway, bare feet eliciting groans from the ancient floorboards. Downstairs, the living room swam in dimness. The sheet I had employed as a shroud was gone, folded with unnerving neatness upon an armchair. The mask hung again upon the wall, though my memory held no record of returning it there. Its fissures had deepened, converging into a manic rictus. I trained the flashlight beam upon it, my hand trembling so violently the light danced. Then I witnessed it. The mask's surface seemed to ripple, a subtle undulation beneath the glaze, as though its ceramic skin harbored life. I stumbled backward, colliding with a side table, sending a vase crashing to the floor with a muffled thud. Panic surged. Breathe slowly. Think clearly. Could I take it outside, bury it, shatter it into oblivion? No. The mere thought induced a visceral clenching. Some primal instinct warned that destruction offered no solution. It desired something. I could feel the emanation of its want. The mask yearned to be worn. The notion was grotesque, yet it adhered persistently. If I yielded, what then? Would my own identity dissolve behind that porcelain leer? My palms grew slick. I reached towards it, determined to force a conclusion. As my fingertips brushed its edge, a distinct pulse, like a fragile heartbeat, thrummed through my palm. I gagged, recoiling, my knees threatening betrayal. An odor arose, reminiscent of burnt dust and brittle paper. I fled to the kitchen, desperate for recourse. Calling someone? Who would lend credence to such a tale? The phone line offered only a crackle of static. I slammed the receiver down, choked by frustration and fear. Breath tore through my lungs in ragged bursts. The house itself felt altered now, the ambient temperature plummeting. My reflection in the microwave's dark glass revealed a pallid face, eyes wide with terror. Behind my reflected image, superimposed, I saw the mask peering from the hallway threshold. Its grin stretched wider, cracking further. The sound of ceramic flakes drifting to the floor mimicked the snap of tiny bones. My throat constricted. I spun around. The hallway stood empty. Yet turning back to the reflective surface, It reappeared, closer still. A game. My stomach churned. This had to cease. Stealthily, I returned to the living room. The mask hung, deceptively placid, upon the wall, blank and inanimate beneath the dim lamplight. I stood directly beneath it, sweat tracing paths down my temples. Reaching up, I pressed my fingertips against its surface. The crazed lines felt like scar tissue. Slowly, carefully, I lifted the mask from its hook. My entire frame shuddered violently. I nearly dropped it. For a fleeting moment, I contemplated donning it, just to see if compliance might bring release, an end to the torment. But the prospect of that cold ceramic settling over my features tightened my chest like a vice. Instead, I rewrapped the mask in the sheet and thrust it into a box. I hauled the container into the hallway closet, slammed the door, and turned the key in the lock. A flimsy bulwark, but I desperately needed respite to think. Back upstairs, I sought calm. My heart refused to steady. My throat felt abraded. Splashing water on my face in the bathroom, I met my own gaze in the mirror. My eyes looked altered, subtly unfamiliar. The skin around them seemed tauter, as if manipulated by invisible threads. For an electrifying second, I swore I perceived faint, hairline cracks etched near my temples, ephemeral but undeniable. I touched the spot. They vanished. Imagination, I insisted. Stress. Returning to the bedroom, I locked the door, then shoved the heavy dresser against it for added security. Outside, the wind rose, scraping skeletal branches against the window pane. I fought thoughts of muffled laughter, of shifting smiles. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed. Yet, as my eyelids drifted shut, a soft, scraping sound emanated from within the room. My throat seized. I snapped the lamp on. Nothing. My gaze fell to the floor beside my bed and froze. A minuscule chip of ceramic lay there, a fragment of the mask's glaze, gleaming dully in the artificial light. With trembling fingers, I picked it up. How had this vestige escaped the locked closet? My reflection in the darkened bedroom window captured my attention, revealing something else, the faint outline of a grin playing across my own mouth, a rictus not my own, a muscular contraction I did not consciously command. I attempted to force my lips into a neutral line, to frown, but my cheeks twitched, pulled by unseen puppetry. I dropped the ceramic shard. It landed with a soft click upon the aged wood. The full implication remains elusive, yet as I sit here, ensnared within these time-worn rooms, I know the mask's influence is far from over. I feel its presence, even now a silent susurrus, waiting just beyond the door. Tomorrow might bring departure, if courage can be summoned. But presently, as the air grows thick and my heart pounds its frantic rhythm, I sense it pressing closer, drawn inexorably towards the last fragile ramparts of myself. If I falter, if I yield, it will claim me. And should I don that face, I fear I may never glimpse my own again. The utter quiescence struck first, not the tranquil quiet of deep woods, but a vacuum where birdsong ought to have echoed, where the breeze should have whispered through pine needles. An unnerving hush, profound, as though the forest itself had ceased breathing. Hours I'd trekked, my boots disrupting the leafy detritus, a rhythmic crunch now strangely absorbed by the stillness. Waiting. The woods felt like they were waiting. My device remained stubbornly inert, no signal bars, a ghost on the screen. The GPS had surrendered an hour prior, abandoning me to instinct, a flimsy compass pointing vaguely toward salvation. Sunlight, now slanted and weak, bled through the canopy, stretching shadows into skeletal fingers that clawed across the path. A fool's errand, pushing onward when the trail vanished. Stubbornness warred with a morbid curiosity, a combination I sensed with chilling certainty I'd come to lament. Then, a spark against the deepening gloom, a flicker glimpsed between gnarled trunks. Hope, sharp and sudden, surged. A ranger's outposts? A lost campsite? My pace accelerated, limbs pushing through grasping undergrowth towards that fragile beacon. What materialized halted me utterly. Huddled within a natural clearing lay a cluster of haphazard structures, crooked and time-worn, their windows aglow with a deceptively warm luminescence. Wisps of smoke curled from leaning chimneys. A low susurrus of voices drifted on the cooling air. Relief, potent and immediate, washed through me. People, some semblance of civilization. Surely they could guide me back, offer direction to the artery of the main road. I stepped forth into the clearing, raising a hand in tentative greeting. The response was instantaneous, unnerving. Voices sheared off mid-syllable. Curtains twitched, revealing fleeting glimpses of faces peering out. A door groaned open on protesting hinges. A man emerged onto a sagging porch, his face a landscape of weathered lines, brow furrowed in chary appraisal. "Good evening," I ventured, modulating my tone to sound innocuous, unthreatening. "Apologies for the intrusion. I seem to have lost my bearings on the paths. I hoped you might point me towards the nearest road." He offered no immediate reply. His eyes, shadowed and penetrating, conducted a slow inventory, head to foot. When words finally came, they rasped, thick with disuse. "No paved ways reach this deep, so wanderer. This is Hemlock Hollow. We don't often entertain callers." A tremor traced my spine, unrelated to the evening's chill. The way he uttered callers coded the word with something unpleasant. "My apologies. Truly, I didn't intend to trespass," I managed, striving for a steady voice. "If you could just provide directions to the closest town, I'll impose no further." His frown intensified. "Closest town's a hard journey from here, nights closing in fast. Unsafe, these woods after dark." As if summoned, a distant ululation split the air, raising the hairs on my nape. It resembled no wolf, no coyote of my experience. The man appeared to reach a conclusion. "Suppose you'd best come inside. Settle you come morning." A primal urge screamed to decline, to pivot and plunge back into the darkening forest. Yet logic countered. Lost, night falling, unknown predators stirring. That way lay madness, perhaps worse. Reluctantly, I inclined my head, following him toward one of the larger, more substantial buildings. As we crossed the clearing, more figures emerged silently from shadowed doorways. They observed my passage with an unnerving blend of suspicion and morbid interest, their faces hollow-cheeked and pallid in the dying light. Small children peeked from behind adult legs, their eyes wide, unblinking pools. Within, the air hung thick, dimly illuminated by flickery oil lamps that cast dancing shadows upon walls papered in faded, indeterminate florals. The furniture possessed an ancient quality, heirlooms worn smooth by generations. Wood smoke mingled with another scent, subterranean and faintly cloying, defying identification. "Name's Silas," the man stated, gesturing toward a scarred wooden table. "This is my wife, Morwen." A gaunt woman with streams of gray hair gave a curt nod from her station by the hearth. Her gaze remained fixed on me as she methodically stirred a cast-iron pot suspended over the low flames. "I'm Alara," I offered, forcing a strained approximation of a smile. "Thank you for your kindness." Silas emitted a non-committal grunt. "You'll bide here tonight. Come dawn, we'll address getting you back to whence you came." The urge to argue, to insist on immediate departure, felt futile. I was, for the present, reliant on their dubious charity. Morwen ladled a portion of stew into a chipped earthenware bowl, setting it before me. The aroma, surprisingly rich, provoked a sharp pang of hunger. I hadn't eaten since morning's light. I sampled a cautious spoonful. The flavor was intense, deeply gamey. "What sort of meat is this?" I inquired, partly to fracture the oppressive silence. "Best not trouble yourself with queries. You've no appetite for the answers, too," Silas retorted, his tone effectively sealing the topic. As I ate, a profound sense of wrongness solidified within me. The unblinking scrutiny of Silas and Morwen, the preternatural quietude outside, that strange, pervasive odor, it all coalesced into an inescapable dissonance that prickled my skin. Later, Morwen indicated a small, Spartan room upstairs. The mattress was uneven, the blankets bore a musty scent, yet exhaustion overrode fastidiousness. I lay down, fully clothed, seeking oblivion. Sleep must have claimed me, for I surfaced abruptly, adrift in unfamiliar darkness. A moment's disorientation, then the day's events flooded back. The hike, the disorientation, the discovery of Hemlock Hollow. A sound from below snagged my attention. Voices, hushed but urgent, seeped upwards through the floorboards. Edging towards the window, wary of betraying my wakefulness, I peered cautiously down. Moonlight bathed the clearing, revealing a gathering. Figures cloaked in long, dark robes stood assembled, their faces obscured by deep hoods. Silas occupied the center, arms uplifted, intoning words in a guttural language utterly foreign to my ears. My heart hammered against my ribs, witnessing the arcane rite. What unholy sanctuary had I blundered into? Suddenly, one hooded head snapped upwards, gaze locking directly onto my window. I dropped instantly, heart seizing, praying I hadn't been perceived. I remained crouched, scarcely drawing breath, for an eternity measured in heartbeats. When I finally risked another glance, the clearing stood deserted under the indifferent moon. Sleep became an impossibility. Every creak and settling groan of the ancient structure jolted me. With the first tentative fingers of dawn probing the gloom, My resolve crystallized. Escape. I eased the door open, each protesting squeal of the hinges an agony. The house remained profoundly silent as I descended the stairs, my pulse a frantic drum against my throat. The front door was within reach when a voice, chillingly calm, spoke from behind. Leaving so soon? Slowly, I turned. Silas stood at the stairs' foot, his eyes gleaming unnervingly in the dimness. I thought I'd make an early start, I stammered, hand hovering near the door latch. He advanced a step. Poor manners, departing without farewell, particularly after glimpsing matters not meant for outside eyes. Ice flooded my veins. I saw nothing. I lied, the tremor in my voice betraying me. Please, I just wish to go home. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate negation. Regrettably, that path is closed. You understand, Hemlock Hollow has traditions for dealing with outsiders privy to our ways. I didn't linger for elaboration. Wrenching the door open, I fled, feet pounding the packed earth, sprinting for the sanctuary of the trees. Shouts erupted behind me, the unmistakable sounds of pursuit giving chase. Blindly, I crashed through the undergrowth, branches lashing my face, treacherous roots conspiring to trip me. That alien cry from the previous night echoed again, closer now, imbued with a terrifying, hungry eagerness that resonated deep in my bones. How long I ran, I cannot say. Lungs burned, legs turned to leaden weights, yet raw terror propelled me onward. The sounds of the hounding gradually receded, though I dared not slacken my pace. A persistent certainty lingered. Something still followed, something that didn't rely on mere foot speed to claim its quarry. Just as strength utterly failed, I burst from the tree line onto the unexpected solidity of asphalt. A vehicle approached. I waved my arms with frantic abandon, heedless of my disheveled, panicked appearance. The car braked sharply, an elderly couple inside regarding me with startled concern. "Are you quite all right, dear?" the woman inquired, her gaze taking in my wild state. I cast a final, hunted look back towards the woods. No figures emerged, yet I felt unseen eyes tracking me from the shadowed interstices between the trees. "Please," I gasped, breath tearing at my throat. "I need to leave this place. Can you drive me to the nearest town?" After a fractional hesitation, they consented. I tumbled into the back seat. As the car pulled away, my gaze remained fixed on the receding forest edge, half expecting to see robed figures step silently into view. But only trees remained, and the deep shadows guarding whatever secrets lay nestled within. I never filed a report about Hemlock Hollow. The tale felt too improbable, too steeped in nightmare. Yet sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, that strange and howling cry resurfaces in dreams. I awaken drenched in cold sweat, profoundly grateful for the mundane symphony of the city. But the knowledge remains, stark and chilling. Somewhere out there, far from any marked road, Hemlock Hollow endures. And I can only pray No other lost soul ever unwittingly discovers its hidden paths. The apparition occupied my kitchen chair. Midnight was breathing down the neck of the day, and the shift had wrung me out, leaving a residue of fatigue so profound it felt like grit beneath my eyelids. I'd stumbled in, vision swimming, craving nothing more than sustenance and oblivion. Yet there he sat, at my table, nursing a mug of coffee with the casual entitlement of someone who belonged. Havenwood Creek, Ohio, a pinprick on the map where lives ran parallel, rarely intersecting beyond nods and necessary transactions. My rented house, a 2-year companion, whispered its secrets through groaning floorboards and rattling pipes. I knew its nocturnal symphony, and I knew with unshakable certainty the deadbolt had slid home hours ago. His presence, therefore, was a physical shock, a plunge into frigid water. I remained frozen in the threshold, my mind stuttering, refusing to reconcile sight with reality. He glanced up, his awareness of me dawning slowly, deliberately. Older, perhaps late 40s, silver threading his beard. His attire, simple shirt, jeans, offered no clues. But his eyes, holding mine with a calm, penetrating steadiness, coiled something unpleasant in my gut. Who in God's name are you? The question tore from my throat, ragged, betraying the steel I'd intended. He sipped his coffee, gaze unbroken. Evening, he murmured, the greeting mundane, surreal. My feet shuffled forward, eyes darting to the counter, homing in on the knife block nestled just beyond reach. How did you get into my house? A negligible shrug. That unnerving gaze pinned me. Does the method alter the fact? My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat prickled along my spine. It alters everything. This is my space. You don't belong here. He placed the mug down with quiet precision, lacing his fingers together on the tabletop. Doesn't it belong to you? The cryptic question unsettled me further. My hands clenched into useless fists. What now? Listen, I don't know what game this is, but you need to leave, right now. A smile touched his lips, faint and unsettling, devoid of warmth. I'm afraid I can't do that. His placid refusal sent a tremor through me. I measured him, gauged the distance. He wasn't imposing, yet he seemed rooted, immovable. Another tentative step toward the counter, my fingers twitching, yearning for the imagined weight of steel. He saw it. That won't be necessary, he advised, his tone still unnervingly level. My hand froze above the drawer. What is it you want? He tilted his head, a thoughtful gesture. Simply to observe. The words hung nonsensical. Observe me? Why? We've never met. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. Haven't we? I swallowed against a rising tide of panic. His illogic was a wall I couldn't scale, his presence an undeniable weight. Trapped. I could only stand, pulse frantic, awaiting his next move. Finally, desperation lent me voice. Leave, or I call the police. One eyebrow arched, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Please do. That confidence, that certainty, it was as if he operated under different rules. Trembling fingers retrieved my phone, clumsily dialing the emergency number. But when my gaze flickered back up, the chair stood empty. The coffee mug remained, a solitary witness on the table. I blinked, vision clearing, the space where he'd sat vibrating with absence. No sound of departure, no creak of a floorboard, no click of the lock. Vanished. I lowered the phone, the dial tone buzzing unheard. Exhaustion? Hallucination? But the mug was undeniably real, its contents still emitting a faint warmth against my hesitant touch. Sleep was an impossibility that night. Cocooned on the sofa, every light blazing against the encroaching darkness, phone clutched like a talisman, I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. A creak and a shadow, his return. Silence answered. The adrenaline eventually ebbed, leaving behind a jittery, bone-weary depletion. By morning, denial offered a fragile shield, a transient, perhaps, slipped out unnoticed during my panic, an overreaction born of stress. He wouldn't be back. He was. The following night, the same late hour, the same soul-crushing fatigue, and there he sat. Same chair, same unnerving composure radiating from him like cold. You returned, he stated, as if confirming an appointment. I halted, the floor seeming to tilt beneath me. What do you want from me? The words were barely audible. That strange, humorless smile reappeared. Conversation. About? He indicated the chair opposite his. Oh, sit. My feet felt leaden. Every nerve screamed flight, escape, sanctuary. Yet he simply waited, patient, radiating an unnerving certainty that I would comply. With immense reluctance, I crossed the small space and lowered myself onto the edge of the seat, muscles coiled, ready to spring. He leaned forward, elbows on the worn wood, drawing me into his orbit. Do you recognize me now? A hard shake of my head. No, I don't want to. Just go. He disregarded the plea. Search deeper, he urged softly. You know this face? My mind frantically sifted through years of faces, encounters, fleeting glances. Nothing resonated, just an ordinary man, unremarkable enough to be invisible, yet a disquieting flicker of familiarity, elusive as smoke. I don't know you, I repeated, the whisper thin as thread. He sighed, a sound tinged with something akin to disappointment. You will? Ice traced its way down my spine. What is that supposed to mean? He offered no answer. Instead, his hand dipped into a pocket, emerging with a small, brittle photograph. He slid it across the table. His eyes held mine. My gaze dropped. My breath hitched. It was me, impossibly young, 5, maybe 6 years old, squinting into the sun outside a house I couldn't place. Beside me stood a man, arm draped protectively around my small shoulders, smiling down. His face, however, was a frustrating blur, obscured by damage or the passage of relentless time. How did you get this? I stammered, the room seeming to contract. He leaned back again, his expression a mask. It has always been mine. I stared at him, the photograph a burning brand in my trembling hand. Who are you? Silence was his only reply. He rose, fluid and unhurried, and moved toward the door. Paralyzed by shock and a primal fear, I could only watch. He paused at the threshold, casting one last look back at me. Soon, he promised quietly. Then the night reclaimed him. I remained seated, the silence deafening, staring at the door he'd closed so softly behind him. The photograph lay on the table, irrefutable proof. The ensuing days dissolved into a fog of anxiety. Work became a series of missed cues, sleep a hunted thing. My thoughts circled endlessly back to him. Each evening, returning home was an act of bracing myself, half expecting his calm occupation of my kitchen. But the house stayed empty, amplifying the silence, mocking my vigilance. Yet the certainty lingered, cold and absolute, settling deep in my marrow. He would return. I felt it, and each time my eyes fell upon the faded image of the girl and the blurred man, the dread resurfaced, sharp and insistent. He was out there, waiting. His promise echoed in the quiet corners of my home. Soon,